My vision is probably about 30 to 40% of normal vision. Basically, the optic nerves, the nerves behind my eyes, didn't develop during my birth development, and therefore the signals from my eyes to my brain do not reach or get interpreted properly. We all have flaws, we all have eccentricities, we all have things that make us who we are, and one of the things for me happens to be my eyesight. Hello Parrot Peeps, and welcome to another video. This is part 2 of my story, and as I explained in part 1, which was kind of a prologue, I've got to be awkward, see. This is going to be about like sort of childhood experiences with growing up with spirit and being able to see and feel and experience different things and how they affected me as a child. Now, my childhood for the first sort of 9 years was quite sheltered because I went to a specialist school for the blind in Bridgend, and the education in those schools were about 2 years behind the mainstream, and most of the people that I would have been around would have either had less vision or around the same vision as me. So in a sense it was kind of its own sort of segregated community, and there was, thankfully now looking back on it, although for a large part of my life I hated these years of my life, and I'll explain about that in the next video, but it was a time that I have now come to look at where I was allowed to experience the things that I was experiencing with regards to spirit communication. A lot of this communication would come through dreams, and the way it played out in the waking world was I would have a lot of imaginary friends. I would kind of interpret the dreams through like television programs I was seeing at the time, but there was also this kind of overarching like mystery. A friend and I used to play it like a game about the great mystery, and I used to have like these dreams where it felt as if I was a part of something bigger than myself, and I would often have strange experiences. I would often see like people around me that no one else could see. I wouldn't really speak of this, mind, because, well, I suppose I would, but the weird thing is that I would speak of it to friends who had visual impairments or were blind, so they wouldn't see the person if they were there or not, if that makes sense. And I'd often, like, in the old school I used to go to, because I used to travel about an hour a day to school. In the old school I used to go to, there was a lot of the kids there used to board in, so they go on the Monday, come back on the Friday, because they lived too far away. But they had like a lot of like places of ambient noise. I remember like near the playground they used to have like a boiler room, and I used to always have this sort of sense of someone was trapped in there, because I would hear someone talking or calling through the ambient noise, and so like there would be certain places in the school that I would often hang out because I would hear or feel these strange things around. And this didn't really interpret to my home life, because there was a kind of separation. My home and family life was still like most normal kids, except for the fact that I used to always be telling myself stories. I would walk up and down the living room, and I would just create stories and just talk to myself and just tell these stories from beginning to end. And they would be wide-ranging, cross-genre, just all these strange kind of stories. And I suppose one of the reasons why I'm making these videos is it's a way of putting these experiences into a kind of focus and into a kind of like a bit of sense making surrounding them, I guess. But there were times where it would spill over. The person that was my guide to normal life, I guess, during these first 9 years of my life was my brother. He was 4 years older than me, and Jonathan was very streetwise, and he was quite sporty. He was into, he was just enough older than me that he would go through something, as all people do when they grow up, in just enough time that when he finished going through it, I would start going through it. Things like puberty, things like understanding, like the adult world, I suppose, and just all different kinds of things. So you'd introduce me to like different friends. He'd introduce me to things like gaming, wrestling, because I'm a wrestling fan and I'm a gamer. Like, I remember, for example, I used to love watching cartoons, and I used to always record things. I was always fascinated by like things like cameras and videos and stuff, and I'd always have libraries of VHS tapes. I'd tape stuff off the telly and that sort of thing. So I was always like fascinated with these stuff since I was a kid. But I remember I couldn't, we had one TV between us, and I couldn't go up and watch the TV because he was watching WrestleMania, and it happened to be WrestleMania 4. So I think it was around about like the late 80s when this was happening. I can't remember the date of WrestleMania 4 now. But WrestleMania 4 was one of the longest. And that's when I got into wrestling for the first time. I was captivated by, wrestlers such as Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, Andre the Giant, that sort of thing. So I kind of had like this weird juxtaposition. But one night, my mother came out and saw me sat on the windowsill. The house I lived at, you had like a windowsill where you could basically just climb onto from the stairs, and you overlooked the mountains, like the foot of this mountain, and at the foot of this mountain was a culvert. And I used to hate the culvert, because when we used to go for walks at the mountain, you used to like have to be carried over it or jump over it. And because I had little depth perception, I used to find it was probably only about like sort of that wide, but to me it may as well have been a chasm, right? And I seen this guy sat there looking at me, and he was just staring at me, and I was staring at him. And my mother came out, and she goes, "What are you looking at?" And I was like, "There's a dude down there. Can you see him?" She said, "No, Jack, I can't see him at all." I'm like, "Well, he's there. He's there." And there was other times, like when I was very young, I remember having this big perspex screen in the room, right? And one of those old video game things, I can't remember what they were called now. There's a special name for them, but it escapes me off the top of my head. But there was like these it's like a little car, and like a screen would go back, do like a little loop, so it'd look like you're driving a car. So I'd sit down and sort of pretend I was driving this car. I was about 3 years older this time, and I remember sort of looking to the corner of the room. There was this big dude stood there, looked a bit like The Rock. Obviously I wouldn't have thought he looked at The Rock at the time, because I didn't know who The Rock was, but he did. He looked like a giant American wrestler, right? And this is even before I was into wrestling. So he was like, I'd have like these weird sort of interludes. I would see shadow people dancing on my walls. I would hear things as I was going to sleep. When I got into wrestling, I would sort of lie on my bed, and I could see like a little TV screen on the ceiling, and I could see like these wrestlers. And it was like as if I could see these things. I could see like little orbs around me and stuff. And none of it did me any harm, right? none of it did me any harm. The amount of times that the people come to me and they ask me about kids that can see spirit, right? I think you gradually come out to it at the right time, right? And I always say this to people, is that you need to engage and talk about it. Because that was the biggest thing, is all the strange things that I was experiencing. Because obviously I was left a lot to my own devices with people who I suppose didn't really have much of a different sort of viewpoint. I was left to express it. I could express what I was going through. I could express what I was seeing. And gradually, I was very lucky because even though my mum and dad were separated, both had a frame of reference. So both had their own experiences, or in both my mum and dad's families, they had people who worked as mediums or worked like in Wicca, or they had like that sort of background. So I could talk about it a little bit. It wasn't focused on either, so it wasn't made a big thing of. It was just the fact that I could talk about it when I needed to talk about it. And that was huge. That was a huge thing looking back. What I found was quite strange though is because I would sometimes see things that were quite scary, and I think I'd get insight into things that were happening in the world at that time. Those sides where I would talk to other people, like they would be like taxi drivers, for example, where they wouldn't be very understanding about it and they would take the piss out of it. And so there was a lot going on back then that it was a lot sort of for me to sort of process. So around about 9-10 years old, I was taken out of the special needs school and put into a more mainstream environment. And that's when things started to change with regards to what I was seeing and what was happening to me. So if you are a parent, and I'm not a parent, so I can't speak from a parent's point of view, I can only speak from the point of view of someone who's gone through it, right? Being able to express it, being able to explore it without judgment, and having someone around who had a frame of reference that was willing to learn a bit about it, because my mother did, and I think my dad did as well actually, that helped a lot. And being able to be included when the adults in the family would have these types of discussions, even if it's just to listen, that helped a lot. Because at that time, I knew no different. It would only be when I went into my teenage years that I started to see the opposite. And that's when this started to become a lot more real. And would take more of a form as it is akin to now. So I hope that's at least entertained you. That's kind of like my sort of childhood story and where I came from. And yeah, I just wanted to share that with you guys. And I'm quite enjoying sort of telling this story. I don't know what effect it's going to have, but again, if it helps one person, job done. So thank you for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Love and light. Hi guys, it's Jared from Paranormal Now. I hope you like the channel and hope you like the content. If you do, check out some of the other videos on screen now and click the button below to subscribe to the channel. Hope to see you soon. Take care of yourselves.